hey, I think this is take 3 or 5 or 12 or something. Anyway, I don't have this scripted, so sometimes I have to stop and start and come back to it. But I wanted to take a moment. It's the holiday weekend here in the United States. It's a weekend during which we always celebrate freedom. And there are a lot of freedoms right now that feel like they're being shaken. And that's kind of across the spectrum. If you're very, very conservative, very, very liberal, there are people in power, there are changes being made that are distressing to almost everyone. So I don't feel like this is directed at just one audience at all. And I wanted to talk about the nature of true freedom and what keeps us from feeling that we are truly free and that we have an internal locus of control rather than being controlled by outside circumstances, events, people, laws, that sort of thing. I'll get to that in just a moment. I have thoughts. I wanted to take a minute though and give kind of an umbrella update. If you've been following me through my own email list over the years, many of you have been with me for a long time. If you have also connected with or only connected with either the Institute for Creative Living or the Heal Plus Create platform, I wanted to also kind of catch us all up to speed on what's happening, because there's been so much happening, so many developments, all of them good and exciting, but sometimes it can be a little hard to stay on track with that. So let's start with that. The Institute for Creative Living, we have a very big milestone that happened this week. We got the nonprofit 501c3 status filed, so we're now moving through that process, and the government says that takes between 2 and 4 months to get fully approved, and I'm really excited about this. When I started the Institute for Creative Living, I knew that we wanted to have one portion of it be a nonprofit, and people have asked me, well, why do you need a nonprofit? Why don't you just create events and experiences and content and offer it for sale? And here's why. Because having worked in self-help, personal development, spirituality, publishing, and events for, the last 8 or 10 years, I began to notice that there was a very sort of specific demographic, and I've talked about this in a recent update as well. There's a specific demographic who has led the way in reading those books, going to those retreats, committing to that kind of interpersonal work. And that is, most of the time, it is between 45 and 70-year-old white affluent women. I love this demographic. I love the people, okay? Not just the demographic. I love the people. I love the commitment, the bravery, the opening up, the vulnerability, everything it takes to really go into our own personal self-discovery, personal healing, growth, all these things. And I've known for a really long time that I am called to help develop better ways of inviting other people in, because the world is so full of people who don't fit that demographic, racially, age, economically, all the different ways, educationally, don't fit a certain demographic. And they are so hungry. There are so many people out there who go, I want my life to feel more on track, on purpose. I want to feel more full of joy and, the sense that I am in the seat as the creator of my life. But the way those things are being presented over there, that must be for those people. I'm not one of them. I want you to know that what we are developing is for truly everyone. Anyone who says, I want more in my life, that's what we want to help you do. And that requires healing. It requires being reconnected to our inner creative selves and learning how to commit to letting more joy in, letting more of the excitement that happens when we come into alignment with our own true inner selves. And how can we take baby steps forward? So a lot of that needs to be research-based. A lot of it needs to have time and thought put into how do we put out invitations that other people can even perceive, that they can even hear. So that's one of the big things the Institute for Creative Living will be involved with, and I'm so excited to have that really underway now. And during the process of offering the Heal Plus Create virtual retreat earlier this year, it became really clear that, this needs to be one of our major outreach programs. And so we've been developing that platform, including the community, technology, and all the different ways of, bringing over existing groups communities that already lived on the Institute for Creative Living onto the Heal Create platform. So that will be up and running before too long, and I'm so excited about that. It looks great. It feels much better. It will soon also have a mobile app for Android and iPhone, which makes the experience of connecting and using it actually a lot more comfortable. So I'm very excited about those two things, and there will be more updates coming through email so that you'll know exactly. If you're a member, existing charter member of the Institute for Creative Living, don't worry. None of it's going away. You aren't going to be suddenly, bait and switched into something else. We will totally make that transition as easy as we can, and also I feel like make it a much more attractive experience to be involved with there. So the nonprofit status is filed. The government says that takes between 2 and 4 months. I'll be having a initial roundtable board meeting with my board of directors and research people in the next 30 days, and I'm so excited about that. I think I've mentioned in a previous updates who some of those people are. But that really will become a place where we can dig into the meat of what it is that's needed to begin to help people have the processes, not just the information. Certainly the information, certainly the research-backed knowledge, but even more so, how can we help people begin to experience more of that for themselves? So it's not our stuff, it becomes your stuff, your own process, your own practice, your own life. So that's very exciting. Let's see. I also just literally 10 minutes ago received the copy of this new book in the mail. It is The Great Book of Journaling and How Journal Writing Can Support a Life of Wellness, Creativity, Meaning, and Purpose. And it's edited by Dr. Eric Maisel and Linda Monk, and these are a couple of my really favorite people. Eric Maisel's also on the new board for the Institute for Creative Living, and he is psychologist. He founded really the practice of creativity coaching. At his age of mid-70s, he keeps a very full coaching calendar with people, and he's written over 50 plus books. So Linda Monk runs the International Association for Journal Writing, and I actually have in the email here, I have a link. She just put together a series that I was part of, and it's available through July 4th. You can get all 7 sessions. It's for men who journal, right? And so this is part of that outreach. How can we bring more people into these practices so it's not just seen as that's for those people? But this book, I have a chapter in it, and I really feel honored to be part of this project. It just came out, and the publisher hadn't yet sent me a copy, so I couldn't hold it up and show you, but it just showed up in the mailbox just before I was getting ready to sit down and do this update, so it seems like serendipity. So I want to invite you to connect with this book. There's a bunch of chapters in there. Each one has specific processes, so I think there's something in there for everyone. I'm excited to have shared part of my story of how journaling really helped me reorient, helped me heal, helped me come back into a sense of inner guidance as I was going through one of the most extreme and difficult periods of my life about 12, 13 years ago. And so I just love that, I was invited to share this chapter in this book, and it's beautiful. There is so much good information in there. And again, not just information, things you can try. Some people might really love the process that I use in my chapter, but you might not, click with that. But there are a bunch of other ways of approaching this that you might go, okay, yeah, that's me. I've never really been able to develop a journaling practice that made sense, but I think I can try that. So I want to invite you to, get the book and start actually practicing. Let me take a minute here and talk about this true freedom thing. So I'm not going to get into specifics. If you follow me on social media, you probably have seen in the last week or two, I've actually come out and felt very passionately about some of the political things. And that's always for me a little bit uncomfortable because it can be so alienating for people. And I have a lot of people who follow from across the spectrum. I don't like to belittle or dismiss anyone based on how they see life, how they experience life, and sometimes I do that, is the truth. So today's update is really not about the specifics of policies and laws and things that are really causing us a lot of distress. I want to acknowledge that, though. I know that many, many people are feeling distress over what's happening in our world and how will we navigate this? Can I even stay in this country? Is this country going to stay together? And we're moving through this July 4th holiday, and that's when I was a child, I loved everything about it. I loved the great big symbolic bombs bursting in air, the fireworks. I loved the picnics. I loved the crowds of people. And what's been interesting is to feel my discomfort with some of that grow over the years, because I feel like some of it is celebrating aspects of our national identity that hasn't been thoroughly examined. We haven't processed it yet. We're working at it. But I also don't want to diminish the fact that America is a truly great experiment in human history. It's a truly great experiment in what is human freedom. How can this be held together? Can we create a sort of vessel that will allow people to continue to evolve and grow and develop as they really are, and feel like they can do it safely, that they can do it without, persecution, without being scrutinized all the time? And I know a lot of people feel right now that that is not possible. What I want to invite you to do, though, is think about this idea of having an internal locus of control versus an external one, which means that my life, my experience is at the mercy of outside forces, right? I don't want to bypass or gloss over the idea, though, that outside forces do affect us. It's like if you were walking through a blizzard and you just kept chanting a mantra, outside forces don't affect me. My experience is not up to the mercy of the weather. Well, the fact is you might freeze to death, okay? So let's be realistic. There is a lot of opportunity for outside forces to affect us, to cause us distress, to cause us discomfort. And probably the biggest one is to cause uncertainty. What will happen next? I've talked so much over the years about the difficulty we have with absorbing a rate of change. And since my son was born, my oldest son, 25 years ago, 1997, that was the first time I had internet in the house. And from that moment, that's kind of the watershed for me in my mind. From that moment on, life began to change very, very rapidly. Now, in our grandparents' or great-grandparents' time, what might happen during a single lifespan would be very incremental change. There might be a better development of a carriage, or, some new farming technique or something like that would come into being. The factory, the mechanization process might be improved. So they'd begin to see improvements, or at least change. And it wasn't that hard to keep up with it. As we have begun to move through so much change so quickly, it's very, very difficult to know anything about the ground underneath our feet. Change brings with it uncertainty, because we don't know exactly what's coming next. Because change is happening so rapidly, our human psyches are actually being asked to absorb and metabolize more change than our generations ago ancestors might experience in 2 or 3 or 4 lifetimes, right? Now, Generation Z, my kids, and probably a lot of you have Gen Z kids or grandkids, they were born on the wave. They were born kind of like a sea otter's children, babies. They were born on the wave, so they immediately had to learn to swim and surf. So change for them is still very uncomfortable, because it's psychologically uncomfortable for all of us, but they're less resistant to it. Those of us from other generations, it is really a lot of difficulty, because our identity we want to find sure footing and ways to attach our identity. This is who I am. I'm a Republican. I'm a Democrat. I'm a Christian. I'm an atheist. Whatever it might be, it feels good to our psyche to say, this is who I am, and identify with that group and with its rules and with its limitations, but with the benefits of the community within those groups, and also the benefits of saying, this is how I see life, and I'm with other people who see it similarly. What we are called to do right now is return the locus of control back where it has always belonged, which is within. All the Gnostic teachers, all the leaders of mystery schools, down through the ages, the great philosophers, have always said this: the locus of control, the true place where navigating life comes from, should be within. And those of us who also feel connected to the greater universe of intelligence and information and love and creativity, know that that inner place is also what opens us up to and keeps us connected to information, serendipities, synchronicities, real magic, miracles, or just the ability to solve problems, if you would prefer it that way. So I just want to say that right now we're in a time when we are feeling like freedom is under attack. And whether you're far left or far right or somewhere in between, I don't think anybody is immune from this sense that our freedom is under attack. And I would like to point you back to Viktor Frankl and his classic book, and it changed my life. It actually brought me out of victimhood during a time in my life that I felt terribly victimized by the worldwide financial crisis in 2008. I felt like I had all of my skills, my business, my money, my credit score, my identity really ripped out of my hands back then. And that was and as I moved through that period of time, it was important for me to acknowledge that that's how I felt. And reading Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, really helped me get back in contact with, I'm responsible to create a life within these circumstances, right? Not ignoring circumstances, but asking, who do I want to be in the face of these circumstances? How will I respond? Can I widen the gap between stimulus, what's happening, the event or the circumstance or the feeling, and response? The wider that gap is, the greater our control, the greater our inner knowing that the locus of control, the location of it, is in here, not out there, right? I know this is actually really hard for a lot of people to hear, because they, especially if you're, let's just call it what it is. I'm a white male, right, living in America. I have so many privileges, and I feel like those privileges come with responsibilities, but I have not had the actual experience of living as a woman in America whose reproductive rights are, constantly being challenged and questioned, and now seem like they're very much under attack. I've not lived as a different race, not part of the white race. I don't have that experience. So I don't want to diminish, if you have one of those other experiences, I don't want to diminish the impact of that on you. I want to acknowledge that you have lived through more difficult things than I have, right? I want to say, though, it is universally true that if we're willing to return the locus of control inward, then we can begin to gain a greater sense of peace, reduce our anxiety. We can come more deeply into our power as creative beings, right? So we can begin to, in that space between stimulus and response, that's where our power is. And as Frankl said, I can't remember the exact quote, but he said, our greatest power is when we learn that I get to choose. I get to choose who I am, no matter what's going on outside of me, no matter what the circumstances might be. I get to choose. And this was written by a man who had the manuscript of a great book he was working on sewn inside of his coat as he was being taken into the concentration camps. And as his wife and new child were ripped from him, and eventually his coat with his manuscript was taken from him, he had to make a choice. And he began writing what became Man's Search for Meaning in his head and on little scraps of paper. And he was a keen observer in the middle of experiencing it himself. As I read that book with tears in my eyes back in the most difficult time of my life, I began to realize this isn't about comparing and saying, my circumstances are, somebody else has it worse than me. That's always going to be the case, right? But it did help me gain perspective, because I began to realize, listen, if Viktor Frankl can write these powerful truths in the middle of being stripped down to the bare wire of humanity in ways that to me are unimaginable, right? I really can't imagine. I don't care how many times I watch Schindler's List, I still can't imagine going through what he went through. So if he can come to those conclusions and share them so powerfully from that place, maybe me sitting here in this lonely warehouse, part-time job, carrying boxes around in my Honda Accord, maybe, just maybe, I'm not even challenged as deeply as he was. So maybe, just maybe, it's time for me to learn how to take steps forward in my life. And I just want to say I get very emotional frequently as I think about the last 15 years of my life and watching what's coming together more quickly. even as few as 5 years ago, I wasn't sure if I would ever have the will, the focus, the energy, the hope, all of that to be able to create something that mattered to me. And so I'm sitting here today in front of this camera talking with you, feeling so much gratitude, and it's not a belief anymore that it is possible to heal, that it is possible to come back into the director's seat of our own lives. I know it is, because I've gone through deep depression. I've gone through what felt like I'm just broken now. I'll just never get the necessarily will and focus and drive and energy and all of those things together again. And so I want to just say, if you are dealing with really distressing circumstances in your life, first of all, I want to acknowledge that. Let's not talk past that too quickly. That's part of why using a journaling practice can be so transformative and healing. If you're dealing with that, though, I want to invite you to allow in that tiny spark of hope that says it is possible. It's not possible all at once. I don't know how it's possible, but it is possible for me to reconnect to the creative energy within me. And it is possible for me to begin moving just an inch or two forward toward what matters to me, toward what I would love to create. And I want to just also bear witness to the fact that as you do that, I don't fully understand this. Quantum physicists and different ones are beginning to explain some of these things differently now. But I just want to say, I don't fully understand what happens when we move out of victimhood, and again, this isn't talking you out of feeling like you're a victim if you're really feeling that. I want to just say that it is possible to move back into the role of, I've just been reading a fantastic book called Hero on a Mission, and it talks very specifically about the hero's journey, hero on a mission. It's possible to move out of the role of being controlled by the villains in this world, whether they're people or laws or institutions or whatever it might be, that's the villain, that operates as the villain. And it's possible to slowly and steadily move out of the victim role, where the locus of control is everything outside of me is controlling my life, my experience, my possibilities. It's possible to move into the role of hero, which means this is now becomes a transformative experience of coming back into the role that you were always meant to have, which is the inspired creator of your own life. And I also want to say this about freedom. That's the most basic kind of freedom to reclaim, is the inner freedom, the inner locus of control, the point in you that says, I might not have very much room between stimulus and response, but I have a little. I can make one choice today that is true. Kind of like Ernest Hemingway said, about writing, just write one true sentence, write the truest sentence you can. So if it's about choice, maybe it's just one choice today that you get to make in the direction of what feels true to you. You can make one choice. But let's talk about other people. If we wish to be given freedom and tolerance and the ability to grow and develop and evolve, if we wish to be given that freedom without scrutiny and judgment, without oppression, we have to give it to other people as well. And I'm talking about people it's really hard to give it to. I'm talking to myself right now. It's hard for me to want to be tolerant of people I see just out there making laws and actually gloating about how they're taking over big parts of government, how they're passing things that do not reflect the will of the people, not as a general thing. It's really hard for me to be tolerant of those people. I also know that I get the world to live in that I give out, that I give to other people. And so this is not a matter of condoning or becoming soft and easy. Sometimes we do need to take an actual stand for what matters to us. It takes me a long time to come all the way forward. And then, of course, people don't like that. But you know what? That's not the important point. The important point here is that as we come more and more firmly into the principles that really mean things to us and that we're willing to take a stand for, we need to remember, like Nietzsche said, beware when you're fighting the monsters that you don't become a monster. That's a paraphrase. So I want to just say that one of the commitments I've made in my life is, no matter how passionately I feel, no matter how sometimes angry I might even feel, that I need to, when I'm feeling myself overwhelmed with a sense of anger, resistance, all of those things, to take a step back and ask myself, what choice do I have right here? And there always is one, okay? So I want to close this and just say thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of my life. Thank you for participating in the creative projects that I have going. I'm so excited about developing those. And of course, I don't do this alone. I do it with you. And so I will be, giving you more information, more invitations for ways to connect and help me grow what I feel like is something that actually helps more of us create lives that matter. And these are the lives we were meant to live. I believe that Heal Create, for example, is an expression of my absolute knowing that you deserve to live a life that feels deeply fulfilled, that feels aligned with who you really are. You deserve that. That's how we're made. And so I am committed to the process of bringing that all the way into being and supporting you as you bring what, those things that matter to you, that are true to you, into being as well. Thank you for being here.